About 66 million years ago, on the land of present-day Mexico, two of the largest living creatures, on one side the T-Rex and on the other side the Triceratops, were fighting to keep their lineage alive. Just like two swords can't stay in one command, this fight had reached the point where both understood that only one would survive today. But who? Could a vegetarian be so powerful that he could defeat a non-vegetarian of his own size? Or was the victory of the other non-vegetarian dinosaurs final? So who do you think would have won the battle of the largest vegetarians and meat-eating animals of that time? Also, look at these. These are the Megalosaurus, Allosaurus, Ichthyosaurus, and Plesiosaurus of the Jurassic period. Out of these four, only three were able to come into the Cretaceous period and evolve into these three. Now in this case, if you think that there is a match between these three, then you are 100% wrong. The actual match here is this dot on top of that. Look at these two. The first of these was the ancestor of mammals, but yet he gave eggs. The second is the one who, despite the dominance of the egg-laying creatures, had developed a pouch like a kangaroo inside him to hold their babies. So was the Cretaceous period a period in which such weird, out-of-the-box genetic mutations were triggered due to a special kind of strange environment? Or was all this change the result of the natural survival strategy? Well, today in the third and last episode of our dinosaur series, we will cover all those questions step by step in the form of a story, so that you can experience in detail how the Cretaceous period actually was, and how the game of evolution was going on in that era. You will also be able to understand this in your mind. And you will also see how the most powerful creatures in the history of our Earth, the dinosaurs, reached their ultimate potential just to watch their own death. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Dinosaur the Fall.So in the last episode, you saw that, around 145 million years ago, at the end of the Jurassic period, the Pangaea supercontinent was slowly breaking into small pieces. At many places, many fires were erupting, and the life-saving gases released from these fires had started to completely cover the Earth. Now, by the way, this was not a new, unusual event. This has happened many times in the history of the Earth. Every 100 million years, due to the shaking tectonic plates of the Earth, supercontinents keep on forming and spreading, but this time, this incident was unique and unusual. When this supercontinent was breaking, there were many mature creatures on Earth, who were watching this supercontinent in front of their eyes, while they were watching the lives of their fellow creatures. In those days, the environment was such that all the small and big creatures on Earth were yearning for fresh air and a single drop of clean water. And as we saw, due to these terrible circumstances, about 55% of the species of dinosaurs were extinct. Only a few were left to survive. We have the prehistoric mammals, the dangerous mammals Megalosaurus and Allosaurus, the carnivorous Brachiosaurus and Stegosaurus, the flying Archaeopteryx, and finally, the living Ichthyosaur and Plesiosaur. Now, these very remaining creatures were going to continue the story of the Earth. But, the question here is, in the changing times of the extreme, why did evolution specifically choose them? And why did the carnivorous creatures suddenly start growing? Well, this is today's story. So, let's begin. Look, from today, 145 million years ago, due to the ongoing volcanic eruptions, the amount of carbon dioxide in the environment had increased by 2 to 3 times compared to today. The biggest impact of which was on the plants. Because, due to carbon dioxide, the average temperature of the Earth had increased by 3 degrees. Now, I know, you must be thinking that just by increasing the temperature by 3 degrees, how can trees and plants die? So, well, let me tell you, the average temperature that we talk about is an average of the heat of the poles cold to the heat of the equator's heat, which keeps all the systems of nature in equilibrium. And that's why, if the temperature increases by even 1 degree, it becomes so high that it starts melting polar ice. And at that time, the temperature had increased by 3 degrees. Now, because the number of trees had decreased to eat, that's why, during the Jurassic period, these carnivorous dinosaurs had completely disappeared by the time of this era. Because of which, after these carnivorous dinosaurs disappeared suddenly, there was a huge gap in the food chain of the Earth, and because of this, the trees and plants got a chance to spread on the earth again. But, you see, the trees and plants are the primary source of energy in the food chain. Until the people who eat them are born, even the meat-eating creatures have a problem in eating them. And that's why, to fill this gap or niche, the large-scale bird-hibbed ornithischians, iguanodon, and protoceratops started to evolve again. As soon as the urban dinosaurs stepped forward, they took a very important adaptation to survive in the hot environment of the Earth called thermoregulation. Specifically, they redesigned their face and evolved the cheek instead of the jaw, so that with their help, they could control the temperature around them. And they were able to absorb or emit the heat according to the temperature. Basically, there are many blood vessels in the jaw, which are sealed, which keep the body warm, and spread it to cool the body. And because of this, they started to regulate the heat of their body and survive in the increasing heat. Now, where on one side this was happening, on the other side, the mammaliforms were also showing some unique changes. They started to reproduce their eggs, and they changed the way of the oxygen. Where they used to lay eggs first, they started to develop a baby inside their body. Because at that time, the food was not enough, and in such a situation, if they laid eggs, then the energy that their body was producing would be spent on making a thick shell of the eggs. And you may not know, but eggs also need a lot of oxygen. Only when the outside oxygen concentration is high, then they can diffuse inside the egg through fine holes and reach the babies. But like I said before, at that time, the amount of oxygen was very low. So it was not possible. And that's why, to give birth to babies in the body, and to give them oxygen through the umbilical cord, was the most efficient survival tactic, in that age, for mammaliforms. But look, this survival tactic also had its own flaws. If you want to develop a life inside you, then what you are eating is unfortunately increasing in two living beings. That means, someone has to compromise. But the question is, who will compromise? You might think that obviously, the mother will compromise. But, nope. The baby will compromise, not the mother. Because, if the mother compromises, and becomes the victim, then the mother and the baby will both die. And that's why, mammaliforms did an interesting adaptation. They started to give birth to premature babies, and gave them nutrition outside the body. And for this, they adapted a pouch on their body, and gave them a baby, and they evolved into marsupial mammals. With this, they could save their own and their children's lives, and they could also find food, and because of exactly these benefits, such structures started increasing in number. In short, mammaliforms put their entire focus in increasing their numbers. So that even if 80 out of 100 die, then there are at least 20 that keep moving their species forward. But then, some of the living beings from that time were even better than this. Was an adaptation. In those days, big meaty theropods like Megalosaurus, to live in less oxygen, started adopting a technique. They started using a unidirectional respiratory system to adapt. So then they evolved into Spinosaurus. Basically, what happened with this respiratory system was that in Spinosaurus, inhalations and exhalations started happening simultaneously. Because normally, lungs, to function properly, depend on the oxygen concentration outside. If the oxygen concentration is low outside, then our breath will start to suffocate.
But in this new respiratory system, a big air sac developed before the lungs, in which air and oxygen were first concentrated and then passed on to the lungs. That means, the lungs never lack oxygen. And this was the reason why the species like Spinosaurus could survive in less oxygen. So all in all, till this time, all the species, whether they are small or big, everyone had adapted to survive in this low oxygen, hot environment. And while watching, a war of dominance started on the Earth. Now the question here was not of surviving, but of thriving. And that's why the war of dominance started. Now as this war started to grow, the battlefield also started to get smaller. And that's why slowly, this war of dominance started to grow, and that's why the war of dominance started to spread in the sea. Actually, due to increasing temperature and melting of the poles, the level of the sea started to increase slowly. And there started to be floods on the Earth. Because of these floods, all the sources of fresh water on the Earth, like lakes and rivers, their chemistry started to change. That means the amount of salts and minerals in the water started to increase. Using this, the marine life in the sea started to thrive, but, unlike this, it was very difficult to see a different view on the earth. There were fewer hunters and more hunters. Because of this, some dinosaurs started to eat their own children. In this way, there was only one option in front of the living creatures on the earth: to get into the water and start hunting. For this, some dinosaurs, like Spinosaurus, started to adopt an evolutionary tactic again. And with this, they brought many adaptations within themselves. To swim in the water. First of all, they evolved a webbed structure between their legs, just like a duck. And they also made their tail long. And with this, to float in the sea, they started to develop some organs like a dove inside them. Because of all these adaptations, their structures and genetics changed so much that Spinosaurus turned into semi-aquatic Mosasaurus. And in no time, they became the apex predator of the sea, and this was also the time when there was a rise in the water. Because, now, in the water, not just one, but 3 big hunters started to live together. 3 swords in one command. 1 was Mosasaurus, and 2 were Ichthyosaurus and Plesiosaurus. They were competing for only one thing: small fish. This led to the fact that, with the passing of time, the amount of prey in the water also decreased. And the food of all 3 hunters started to become red. That's why Mosasaurus, with great skill, first of all, made its smaller Ichthyosaurus its target. And it started to hunt them. As a result, Ichthyosaurus slowly began to become extinct. Now, looking at the number of Ichthyosaurus, the next target of Mosasaurus was Plesiosaurus. But, before Mosasaurus started to hunt Plesiosaurus, Plesiosaurus cleverly brought an evolution within itself. They saw that the greatest power of Mosasaurus is their teeth and their large size. And so, to combat them, they also brought some adaptations. For example, they increased their size, and brought sharp-toothed teeth like nails. With this adaptation, they evolved into Plesiosaurus, meaning, in the story so far, in the early Cretaceous period, the king of the earth was Spinosaurus, the king of the water was Mosasaurus and Plesiosaurus, and the king of the air was Archaeopteryx from the Jurassic period, which was totally unchallenged so far. But very soon, the most deadly dinosaur that challenged these 3 was going to be born on Earth. Actually, it so happened that, as the mid-Cretaceous period came, the rate of panacea rupture increased. Because of this, earthquakes and floods started to occur on Earth every day. The biggest damage that had to be suffered was to the insects and small mammals living on the Earth. Because of the earthquake and floods, the plants that grew on the Earth were completely destroyed. This started a chain effect, due to which the insects that ate those plants, and in turn, the mammals that ate those insects, started to die one by one from hunger. And in such a situation, to keep themselves alive, some mammals instead of the insects, started to eat the remaining living creatures of that time, like the dead dinosaurs, to eat themselves. But to eat these dead dinosaurs, going out in broad daylight meant becoming the prey of other big dinosaurs, and calling their own death. And that's why these mammals, to find their food, started to go out in the darkness of the night. And looking at the change in behavior of the mammals, they started to adapt themselves to hunt at night. But for this adaptation, they needed 2 things. First, sharp eyes, which could easily see these small mammals in the darkness of the night. And second, fast speed, due to which they could suppress them as soon as they blinked. Now, to make this structural evolution possible, Archaeopteryx started to make the eyes of the dolls round and vertical. Because vertical dolls are the maximum number of eyes that capture light. This increased their visibility at night. And due to these changes, Archaeopteryx evolved into velociraptors. These velociraptors were so aggressive that they slowly started to hunt Protoceratops like the carnivorous dinosaurs, along with the mammals. Because of this, Protoceratops had to protect themselves from 2 hunters. One was their prey, Allosaurus. And the other recently evolved to eat them, velociraptors. And because of this, they used all their energy to strengthen their defense. Because of this, they evolved 3 pointed horns on their body and a hard plate on their delicate neck. And because of these changes, Protoceratops and Triceratops evolved. This meant that for animals like Allosaurus, now, it became difficult to hunt them. And because of this, to keep themselves alive, the remaining Allosaurus started to use their strong defenses to break through their defenses, to bring about an evolution in themselves. They, along with increasing their size, started to point their teeth, so much so, that in just one blow, they were able to crush the neck of the biggest dinosaur, and there, they were able to remove all of its flesh. In fact, to break through the Triceratops' plate, they strengthened their jaws, to the extent that in just one bite, they could crush an average-sized car, with a snap. By this point, Allosaurus, the most dangerous dinosaur ever, had evolved into Tyrannosaurus rex, or T-Rex. For them, hunting any dinosaur was as easy as a snap. And because of this adaptation and evolution, the T-Rex's tail was heavy. And now, it was the turn of the Triceratops to answer. Instead of escaping this dangerous T-Rex, they attacked it, meaning, for them, an actual attack became the new defense. Now, this strategy, you won't believe it, but it proved so useful that it forced T-Rex-like animals to stay in groups for their own safety. And the rivalry between these two is considered the most dangerous rivalry in the history of dinosaurs, even today. Just like that, one day, when a Triceratops was wandering in search of food in the jungle, then suddenly, a group of T-Rex babies surrounded it. But that Triceratops cleverly chewed this group, and from them, started running out of the jungle. But this dinosaur, running from the hunters, where did he know that he was going to get caught in a bigger trap than this? Because, as soon as that Triceratops reached out of the jungle, there, big T-Rexes were already waiting for him. At this moment, he realized that he had to run away. This was a clever move of the T-Rex group. Because of this move, the Triceratops was in the position of fighting or dying. So, to save his life, he took this T-Rex and decided to fight with the T-Rex group. In both of them, a fierce battle began. The Triceratops would kill the T-Rex with their horns, and the T-Rex would injure them with their teeth. But finally, who would win in the end? Well, you see, if the T-Rex and the Triceratops were fighting one-on-one, then definitely, the Triceratops would take out the T-Rex's claws from their horns. But, just like lions, because the T-Rex would hunt in a group, and they had surrounded the Triceratops from all sides, then unfortunately, the non-vegetarian T-Rex fought. So, from this story, we come to know that the T-Rex were definitely undefeatable at that time. But, until when? Because, on the ground, where this battle was taking place, at that very moment, a meteor, 10 kilometers wide, from the sky, was rapidly moving towards them. Which eventually made the Earth look something like this: a barren land where only corpses had been scattered. Now, in those few last moments, what happened with those dinosaurs? What was the situation? How were they suffering? What was the story of their struggle and survival? We have covered this in one of our past videos. You can watch this video here. We have covered it in detail. And I highly suggest you should check out this video so that you get a comprehensive knowledge of the dinosaurs at that time. And if you are watching this video, then most probably you must have watched the previous two videos, because here, the series of dinosaurs was going on, and this was the third video. If you haven't watched it, then I highly suggest check out the first two parts as well. Part 1 and Part 2 are very interesting. You will enjoy it a lot. From this video, you got to learn something new. And if you like such series, then write in the comments below on which topic you would like to watch such series for a comprehensive knowledge. Write down in the comments. Share this series with your friends as much as possible, so that they also get some knowledge through entertainment. See you next time. Till then, as always, stay curious, keep learning, and keep growing.